homeschool mom, I think that reading is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing that our kids will learn. Not only how to read, but to enjoy reading, to absorb what they read, and become lifelong learners is very important. But I don't assign books to my kids. Today I'm going to share why that is and a few ways that I go about encouraging them to read and bringing them up to love reading without forcing it. Hey, I'm Lindsay and welcome to One Praying Mama. My desire with this channel is just to encourage you, let you know you're not alone, and help you along this journey of raising kids to love and follow God. Now, I'll admit that I'm a little apprehensive to share this today because it goes against the mainstream and all the things that I feel we've learned about reading from the public school system. I'm no stranger to going against the mainstream. In my life, I've always kind of spoke out about things that I don't believe in or don't agree with, or things that I don't do as I parent my children that are normal. This almost feels like people are going to get that I'm saying reading is not important, or I don't think my kids need to learn to read or something. So please hear my heart as I share today. I think reading is so important and so valuable, and the reason that I approach it this way is because of my experience with reading, and I want to make sure that I am not getting in the way of my kids learning to love to read. And I'll also include a disclaimer that this is my opinion and this is the way I'm doing this is the way I'm approaching this, but I understand that every child is different. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily how you should do things, how you should approach reading, or what you should do in your homeschool. I'm just sharing what works for me. As always, you should research anything that you feel that you're going to do for your family. You should do something prayerfully. You should take every approach in your homeschooling to God in prayer. And you should be kind of educated on this approach and on why you're doing what you're doing. Because I really think that a lot of research can back up some of these claims that I'm making. You know, there are a lot of influences out there that have supported me in my decision, but I'm just going to share kind of my opinion and my way of doing this. So kind of the background of why I've come to this approach to reading in our homeschool is I was homeschooled 1st through 5th grade, and I loved it, and I love to read. I was a reader, like that's all I did in my free time. I feel like a lot of it was read. And as a homeschooler, I had a lot of free time to do that. I remember taking trips to the library probably every week when we were growing up and coming home with stacks of books. But that all changed when I started public school in 7th grade. I remember starting school and having to do accelerated reader. If you went to public school, I'm guessing you probably remember this program because I think it was just like a normal thing in every public school was AR. And we had to read certain books that were on the list, and each book had a point value, and you had to have so many points per grading period. I remember there were very few books that interested me on these lists. I'm sure there were some good books on there, but I remember everybody just talking about, oh, I read this book to get this many points, and towards the end of the grading period it was like a rush to make sure you got all the points in for your book. So you probably have experienced this, and if you didn't remember, you probably do now. So this new system of reading was something I kind of rebelled against. I remember some of us just talking about, you know, the different books that we read for these tests, and then sharing like the test questions and, you know, just the gist of the book with each other so that other people could take this test and get the points without reading the book. I remember this set me on a path of doing very little reading actually through 8th grade and high school. I remember an 8th grade book report that I did, and I didn't get a great grade on it, but it wasn't terrible. And I remember the teacher wrote on it, "Did you even read the book?" And I didn't. I just, you know, got some information about the book from other people who had read it and wrote a report based on that. Because I so hated reading books that I had no interest in that I was just assigned for a book report or for a test. And in high school, I remember reading some books here and there that I enjoyed reading, but they weren't books that I was able to use to count toward school. So I feel like I read less and less, and I did the same thing in high school. Just I read part of a book, or I asked other people what these books were about, and it felt like that was kind of something that a lot of people did in school. It was like we just figured out what we had to do to get by and to get the credit for reading these books without actually reading them. And just reading in general kind of got to the point of, what's the point in even reading a book that I'm interested in if I'm not going to get any credit for it? So as an adult, I started reading again, and I found that I really love to read. Sometimes I read a lot, and sometimes I don't read much, but I have come to love reading again, and I don't want to pass on my distaste for reading to my kids that I had in school. So that has brought me to the point where I don't assign reading for my kids in our homeschool. This is our first year homeschooling, but thankfully my kids finished school out in 1st and 4th grade. They weren't as affected yet by assigned reading as I was when I was in junior high. So as I sat down to make this video, I came up with 3 of the main ways that I do reading in our homeschool. The first thing I do is I trust my kids to become readers by allowing them to just read what they enjoy. My oldest daughter, who is in 5th grade now, is a lot like I was when I was growing up. She reads all the time. We went to the library like 8 or 9 days ago, and she is on, I think, her second to last of 13 books that she got. And she got 13 books because I limited her. She will read all the time. My son, he says he doesn't like to read, but when I was telling him about this video that I was making, he started listing like the series of books that he does like to read, and he had a whole list of them. And when I asked him what his favorite book was, he said he couldn't decide because there were so many good ones that he had read. So he does love to read. He just doesn't read as frequently as my older daughter does, but he does read every day. And the most that I feel like I do as far as making my kids read is sometimes I will tell him after he's done with some schoolwork, go read for 20 minutes. Or in the morning before school, if he's bored, I'll say, go spend 20 minutes reading, whatever book it is that you're reading. Another thing that I do to encourage them to love reading is I spend time reading aloud to them. There's this book, it's called The Read Aloud Family by Sarah Mackenzie, and I highly recommend it. I read it at the beginning of our homeschool year, and I'm also reading it again now just because it was so good, and it just really inspires you to read to your kids, really explains the importance of it, and I think she calls it doing the heavy lifting. Sometimes it's easier for our kids to enjoy reading when somebody does the heavy lifting of reading the book for them. That way they can enjoy the good story that might be a little bit above their reading level, or might just be a little bit complicated for them to understand and decipher the meaning of the book, where if somebody who's more advanced in their reading reads it, they're able to just listen and enjoy. Also, my youngest daughter, who's in kindergarten, she's reading a little bit right now, but I'm able to read to her books that she enjoys listening to. She loves Junie B. Jones, and I love that when I read it to her, I can edit out some of the words I don't want her to repeat, like stupid and dumb. Those are bad words in our house, but she loves listening to books like that. Little short chapter books like calendar mysteries, or books that are funny that my son can read that she might be interested in. I'll read that to her, and then a lot of times she takes a book to bed with the flashlight and she reads it to go to sleep. And it's usually a book that I've already read aloud to her, and she can look at the pictures and she kind of knows the story and knows what's going on. And she always says, looking at the pictures is part of reading, because it is, and that's what I teach her. I just want her to associate books with something that she loves to do. Reading and looking at the pictures and just hearing the story is something that she already enjoys. I also try to make reading just kind of something that we do in our home, and there are books everywhere. They all have some books in their room. We have books in the living room. We go to the library and they get to choose books that they like. And every night they all go to bed with a flashlight or a lamp by their bed, and they spend time each night reading. The third thing that I do that I think really encourages my kids to be readers is I allow them to be bored. We don't do a lot of screens. We don't have computers, tablets, any devices other than our phones and the TV in the house. And very rarely do we watch any TV during a school day, during the week. TV is mostly reserved for the evenings as a family or weekend mornings, and that's when they get to watch the shows or the movies that they like. So reading is pretty much always an option. There are occasions where my oldest daughter, I have to tell her to put down the book and go outside, and usually then she takes a book outside. Sometimes I have to say, put the book down, leave it in the house, and go play. But I think there are much worse things that I could be complaining about. So usually for the most part, she can read whenever she wants. But all of this is just to encourage you to trust that your kids, if you give them the tools to know how to read and you give them the space to choose books that they enjoy and that they love and that they get value out of, then I really think that our kids can be trusted to learn to love to read on their own. When I asked my oldest about what she thought of reading at her old schools and in homeschool, she said that her favorite time at school that she got to read was always when she got to choose a book in her free time at school and just read whatever book it was that she wanted to read. And her least favorite was the reading groups where they just had to read assigned books. She says her favorite thing about reading in homeschool is that I don't assign reading. She gets to read whatever she wants. And she does not try to avoid reading by any means. And this is not to say that I will never assign a book. I'm sure as she gets older in her language arts or in different curriculums that we might use, I'm sure that there will be some reading assignments. And I want to make sure that they have a well-rounded and well-read education. I want them to read the classics, which she's already read quite a few of. And, I do suggest books to her. A lot of her favorite books are books that I loved as a kid and I suggested and she has read. But I always encourage them, if they start a book and they don't enjoy it, put it aside and find something else that they like. Because I really think that if they are reading, that is what's most important. And I just want them to read what they enjoy. And I hope that this video encourages you and works for you too.